Hi everybody, thank you so much for tuning in to the second episode of my YouTube channel, The Mindful Minutes. I appreciate all of your love and support and encouragement. Thank you so much to those of you who tuned into my first episode and provided me with feedback as well. I do appreciate it. It helps me better serve you and grow for myself, so thank you. So today's episode is called A Mindful Perspective. What is a mindful perspective? Well, perspective is the way that we perceive the things that happen to us in life or just life in general. So optimism, pessimism, that's all based on perspective. We hear the glass half empty, the glass half full. That's all based on perspective and outlook, negativity, positivity. It can be really difficult to have a positive perspective on the things that happen to us in life, or even to understand the things that we've been through and how to interpret our circumstances. So how do we really engage in a daily mindful perspective? Because each day we're faced with different challenges, different situations, different circumstances. I want to share an example with you. A while back I was working with a client who was really struggling in his career. He was battling some other things underneath all of it. However, he was very dissatisfied with the career change that he had made several years ago. His unhappiness in his career, although the position he was in most would perceive as very successful, was not gratifying to him at all. He was going home miserable, and that misery was translating to the way that he was treating his family, the way that he was engaging with his children, and it overall just became a problem. So when he came to me, we sat down and talked about the things that were really making him unhappy in his life. And my first question was, how do you deal with your career? What changes can you make to be happier in this area in your life? And he said, well, at my age right now, it would take me a lot to go back and do what I really want to do. I'd have to basically start over. Okay, so essentially that means that for the meantime, he needs to accept his circumstances and where he's at in his career, and then set a game plan on how to change if he wants to make that change. So I said, well, what do you do when you wake up each day? His answer was, I don't want to get out of bed because I just don't want to deal with it anymore. I'd much rather go back to my 10-year-old, 12-year-old self and not have this responsibility to worry about. So when I wake up each morning, I think of how I don't want to wake up and get out of bed. That saddened me because that is a perspective that he's ingrained in himself, and how miserable he is because of this circumstance in his life that he feels he cannot change. So my challenge to him was to shift his perspective, to be a little bit more mindful on the positivity that was coming out of something that he felt was a negative situation for him. A job that he wasn't happy at for a lot of personal reasons, as you should be, satisfied in your career, absolutely, especially if you've spent money on school and education and worked hard at it. You should absolutely be doing something every day that you love. So I understand not wanting to get up and go to your job that you're miserable at. However, on the flip side of that, that job that was creating misery for him was also helping him to be able to provide in many ways in his life that he wasn't necessarily acknowledging or giving himself credit for. So he has young children at home, he has a wife at home, he has a family, they have goals and things that they want to do, perhaps travel or spend time with the kids and quality activities, whatever it may be. This job was allowing him to provide for his family in ways that he was neglecting to acknowledge. And so after we had this conversation, I challenged him to, in the next morning, wake up and tell himself one positive thing about this miserable job that he had that was allowing him to still live his fulfilling life. And he did that. And when we followed up at our next session, he said, I have to thank you because I was only focused on the negativity in my circumstance that was not allowing me to see any sort of positivity in it. So he was able to shift his perspective, and he was able to understand that while right now in this moment, he could not change his career with the snap of his fingers. However, what he could do was make the best of that moment with what he was given. And what he was given was an opportunity to have a job and to provide. And so that alone helped him gain a more positive outlook and also encouraged and motivated him to embark on the true career path that he wanted to go down, which is what he's working on now. So, as you can see, being mindful of the way that we look at our circumstances really does change and can be a life altering change of the way that we see our circumstances. It doesn't always have to be negative, even when we feel that the consequences of what we're going through are only negative. There's always a silver lining somewhere. And it may sound cliche, but it's absolutely true. We can always pick out positivity even amongst the negativity. So that's why I wanted to do this episode today on perspective, because perspective is huge, and some of us are stuck in a perspective that is less than motivating in our lives and less than encouraging. And sometimes we have to stop and say, look, this may not be what I want it to be. This may not be exactly how I want it to be. This may not even be something that I've asked for. However, because of this, I'm able to do this. Or because of this situation, I'm able to focus on something else that I may not have necessarily been able to focus on. So for him, for my client, he was able to really become motivated by seeing the positive in his situation, and then also by understanding that it was up to him to consciously make that change and that decision to do what he loved and to embark on that path. And in the meantime, as that change was evolving in his life, he was still able to see that he was gaining positive experiences out of what was once only a negative situation that he really didn't even want to get out of bed for. So I challenge everybody watching today to engage in a shift of your perspective, because it really can be life-changing for you. And when we stop and think and focus on what we can change, and in the meantime, how we can still make life enjoyable and livable, it does make all the difference, and it takes a lot of that underlying misery away. And then it allows us to live a much more fulfilling life sooner than later. So I want to thank you all so much for tuning in. I really appreciate your support. I hope that you do continue to follow me, as each tidbit that I talk about will focus on a different area of life, a different circumstance, and a different experience as how it relates to me, and hopefully how it relates to you as well. How we view ourselves translates to how we treat ourselves. And in this situation, in this circumstance, how we are mindful of our perspective translates to how we treat the circumstances in our life. So let's be a little bit more mindful to have a positive perspective, a positive outlook, and perhaps we'll treat life as if it's much more fulfilling as it should be. Thank you so much, everybody. I appreciate your support. I appreciate you for tuning in today. Please stay tuned next week for the next episode of A Mindful Minute. Again, subscribe if you haven't subscribed yet. Click that like button if you have not clicked that like button. Feel free to reach out and give me any feedback that you have. I really appreciate it. And remember, mindfulness is a spiritual elevation, not a personal delegation. Thank you so much. I'll see you next time.